Thank you so much, Elena, for inviting me. Salvatore warned me that I should not make any jokes on Sicily this time. See, he gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse. We are, we are a strange species as human beings, right? I mean, and we are looking at complex, sometimes we look at very complex issues very simply and very simple issues very complexly. Very simple thing, like, don't you think when somebody dies, except tragedies, when somebody dies, should we have that moment of somebody's life in a wedding hall where we are enjoying what he or she did the whole life, right? Celebrate it. Your family feels less stressed because you're in a very joyful place. Your friends want an occasion to drink. Your enemies are happy that you're gone, right? The only people who are unhappy are the bankers whom you took money from, right? Now we have certain, again, like people like Salvatore will say, what will happen to the jobs of the funeral houses? That's where we should have our weddings, right? Isn't that a funeral of sorts where you're losing your independency in many ways, right? So my question is, when you start off low and then end up high, but we always start up high and end up low in the section of poverty, right? We are always opposite in our thinking process, right? Martin, let me tell you, you've completely got it wrong. When you said the UN said about SDGs is not for us, man. It was for them to be sustainable, not for us. Let's be very clear, Martin. Right, right. All of us here want to make something viable, sustainable, accessible, affordable. Moment the UN comes, add UN to everything. Unsustainable, unaffordable, unviable, and UN was created for a certain term that it became unviable. It's a negative connotation. UN is that, man. That is what I found out much later in life. UN had a certain meaning to it, right? So why are we so, in a sense that, poor, when we talk about the poor have always constructed something, right? And you talked about, I would like you to introduce my colleague Rachita here, who works on, you talked about artificial intelligence. I don't want to forget. Because in our office, we lost a lot of the natural intelligence. So we have to rely on artificial intelligence to do that, because that's the only way we can go forward, because the whole world is losing the natural intelligence in many ways, right? So the question is, poor construct, poor develop, poor do something. What do the rich do? Destroy. Right? You need to prove the sustainability of a 1-acre farm. You don't have to prove the sustainability of a missile. What is the sustainability of a missile? Right? The poor constructed the whole thing in Gaza, Sudan, everything. The poor built. The poor built the mausoleum, the stadiums, the Qatar, everything. The Taj Mahal was built by the poor. So do you think poverty should go off? If poverty does not exist, none of us will exist. We are all middlemen here sitting around. Because poverty exists, we are able to raise money. If poverty didn't exist, none of us would raise money. We have no photographs to show at all. Do we have any photographs to show? Look at these kids. Look at those. Why are we glorifying? Why are we patronizing poverty? I do not understand. We are at fault. All of us sitting here are at fault because we play the victim on behalf of the poor. They don't ask us power. They don't ask, please help us. They have not come and asked you help. We are forcing ourselves. We are not creating partners with the poor, right? What are we doing? Oh, look at this. Please give me money. Not as partners, but as showcase. How many of us actually put up the pictures of billionaires and see how they're eating, how they're drinking, how they're cooking? Do we ever do that? Why is it that all the photographs is about poor, pontification of it? We are dehumanizing poverty. And that is why development has not gone beyond version 1.0. iPhone is 16.0, but development is 1.0. We have not gone beyond 1.0. We talk about the same projects 30 years ago. Last year at UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, I gave a presentation that I did it in 1991, and people thought it was a new presentation. Right? That is scary. Isn't that scary? Because you have a new set of people talking the same set of problems, and you have a new audience who has come in from a romantic perspective. We have started to become I's. I have done this. I have done this. I have done this. This whole ego in the civil society is much greater than in the private sector. Right? Civil society is more divided. Elena is actually having one of her most expensive conferences, not in terms of money, in terms of the talent that comes in. And what are we coming here for? A selfish, how many networks can I go? Can I actually talk to the Doen Foundation? Can I talk to that funder? No, one should come here and say, I am actually going to work with 2 or 3 other people, and when we come next year, we will have a plan for 10 million change, moving the needle of 10 million. In this group, by next year, we should be talking of 100 million change than what we did last year. Moment we talk about 10, 15, 20, this conference is useless. Absolutely useless. Right? It's the power of partnerships. Civil society knows. See, private sector always has industry association. Civil society is always competing because it's the same funder. We go into these beauty contests. My proposal is better than her proposal. I am going to reach out to more poor people than that person. The private sector at least produces a product and say my product has a better thing. Why are we fighting for the same people that we are trying to do together? We are the most divided. At conferences like this, we need to work together to actually make it happen, rather than going into this divided silo that I did that, I did this, I did. Boss, we would not exist if the poor didn't exist. I'm sorry. And poor subsidize us in many ways. Completely subsidize us. Right? Now tell me, Uber. Uber is the largest not-for-profit in the world. It'll never make money. But we're going to talk about it as market. Uber survives on poor car drivers who shift from rural areas to urban areas, take loans to have their own cars, and then drive. Uber is subsidized by the poor car drivers because Uber is not responsible if a car driver does not make money or if he's not able to sell the car. Who goes into poverty? Guess what? You know, when we talk about migration, I can imagine the nervousness in Europe towards migrants. I would also be very nervous. Because they learn from history. 250 years ago, some migrants from Britain came to India. Some 250 years ago, Spanish migrants went to Latin America. Look at what those migrants did. They completely destroyed the cultures. They don't want the same migrants to do it this way. Right? So I can imagine, I can sympathize with those in terms of what they're actually going to do, right? So my question is, when a migrant or when a poor person from rural India comes to urban India, we say that we are going to upskill. We're going to give them skilling. We're going to help them. I'm sorry, you're de-skilling 8 generations of rice breeders. You're de-skilling 9 generations of millet growers. You're de-skilling 10 generations of people who know Amazon. Right? And in the name of development, in the name of economic development, and say we're going to upskill them, but we are losing 10, 15. That's the most worst case of brain drain that is happening in the world of knowledge. Because our measurement instruments are in terms of what are the degrees that we get, right? Who is a PhD? As we kept saying last year to Elena, If all of us did a PhD on millets or water, we'll all be called experts of water or millets. A farmer doing 50 years of millets will never be called an expert because he or she does not have a PhD. Because we measure in terms of degrees. Because for us, intellectual poverty is no difference to financial poverty. We believe people who are financially poor are intellectually poor. And that is the basic issue when we think, I am trying to help the poor. Because we are putting ourselves in a hierarchy. And we use the poor for all the subsidies that is required, a watchman, buildings, car driving, everything. Everybody in the COVID talked about work from home. We all had, tell me, a single poor in the world, does he or she have the luxury of work from home? If farmers said, I want to work from home, none of us will eat. Right? If farmers don't even ask for a Sunday off, why are we getting stuck? We are subsidized by the poor in the world. Let's be very clear about that. When we are subsidized by the poor, how do we, and then if we give, look at it, the poor are subsidizing us. But when we give services to the poor, it's pro bono. I will take tax break because I gave services to the poor. That is because I am qualified. I am better than the poor. I am hierarchy. In that thought process, do you think we will ever partner with it? Because our thinking process itself is highly screwed up. So what we are talking is in terms of very small incremental change, poverty will not get off. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that all we say is an incremental change. Very small change. Will not move the needle at all. And the nervousness is, if in the next 5 years, tell me how many of you truly raise your hands, saying that tomorrow, my personal salary will be affected because of climate change. Truly raise your hand and say, my salary will be affected by climate change. None. None of the rich will ever have the issue of climate change because we have the ability to get and run away from it. Run away from it. Year in year, if everybody in the world, poor, have droughts and climate change, it makes a delta of a news. Ethiopia has been going for drought. One major flood in North Carolina, BBC headlines, the CNN headlines, everybody headlines, right? They're going to get FEMA, they're going to get subsidies. How many poor in Ethiopia? How much poor in actually parts of India, Indonesia will get subsidies to what anybody of these will get, right? We say it's very nice to talk about climate change in New York, in the UNG, 1.5 degrees. Really? Will it affect any of us here? I'm sorry, we don't feel the urgency at all. We will say, we will be passionately talk about the statistics because we are great about it. We'll now put in AI to look at the statistics in a much better manner. But none of us will get affected. Let's be very clear. So unless we don't feel what it is to be on the other side, the feeling part, we're not going to come up with solutions. And for that, let us stop calling ourselves I and we. It has to be us. Us as a humanity that we can actually solve. Because the poor have to be part. Because many parts, you look at yourself very frankly, this room, is part of the problem, not part of the solution. We are all middlemen. We are all middlemen end of the day. We need to prove that a conference that 5 years later, where you have 10 people who are under $1 a day is able to sit on this audience and say, this is the transformational change that we require. Are we representing that today? We are still not representing truly. So why I'm saying this is because when last year Elena did this conference, and Elena's doing this is like,
I would go because you have a sect of practitioners who really understand that, yes, there is urgency. And we ourselves get stuck up into showcasing poor as what you call it, as patronizing. We will not come up with the solutions. The next 3 days are very expensive. Extremely expensive, until we do not come partnership with 3 or 4 and said, I'm going to get 10 million people. And 10 million people are going to change where they become the leaders. They, not me. They become the leaders. They become the solution providers that an Ethiopian poor, through AI, through Zoom, is able to teach to an Indian poor or a poor in New York that these are the solutions. That's when transformation happens. That's when the level playing field will happen. And that's when you will see a drastic change in the world's poverty. And climate is going to hit us. It is hitting. Why? It's already hit us to the poor in 1990. It started hitting. Why are we talking it right now? Because the US military has started to shift its base from the coasts of North Carolina to Inter. They are pretty smart. They started shifting 20 years ago. We are just catching up. But the question is to us, until we don't feel it, we are going to take it for a ride. We'll all survive, but many of the poor will not actually survive, right? So when Martin talked about poverty in a holistic manner, in a sense that's what we push for in the organization, is that poverty is not about money. You might be very healthy, but you have no income. You might have massive incomes, but your kid cannot go to school. It's that holistic way of ecosystem we are not taught of. We are not taught. And who are going to be that leaders in 2030 who are going to make transformational change? I want each one of you just to think about it. When none of you were raised hands that I'm not going to be affected by climate tomorrow, isn't that a scary thought process? So whom are we speaking about? So are we here truly for the poor? Question yourself in the next 3 days. If poor have to be part of the solution, that means they need to be part of the relay race from day one, not a we go with the solution and try to fit a problem to it. I have come up with a great solution, so let me fit a problem to it. So I think, Elena, I'm seriously telling that how can workshops or whatever you name it, like this become the norm and reduce the whole sham of the United Nations climate change workshops where practitioners actually come, where we start having the sub-practitioner groups in Kenya, Uganda, inner city of London, Chicago, because poor doesn't have color, creed, caste. It's not the white versus black. It's not south versus north. We talk about south, 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 north, south. It's not of that. Poor are poor. I think we need to be serious. And can only be serious in this. The most successful is that I have now created a partnership, not with a funder. Funder is part of the stakeholder, yes, with 3 other people where we are going to come up with a 5-year plan that we are going to, each one of us together, going to change 10 to 12 million families by 2030. Can you imagine if 3 of us, combination of 3 good, 10 to 20, this room itself has 250 million. We will be able to solve it. I think let's take that as a challenge. Otherwise, we will keep enjoying the subsidies of the poor and clap on our backs that how we are helping the poor. Thank you. Thank you so much.